Hey guys, it's your boy 14 Fluffies here. Today I have another versus between two cards. This time we have Memory Loss versus Breakthrough Skill. So these two cards are both very, well in my opinion, very good cards when it comes to negating effects. So yeah, but obviously each of them has their own strengths and weaknesses, and realistically in the end I ultimately chose to side Breakthrough Skill for the rest of for the time being, as opposed to Memory Loss. And if any of you guys were wondering about that, this video will pretty much explain why I have chosen Breakthrough Skill. So first off, we're going to start off with the opponent, which would be Memory Loss. I'm going to explain the pros and cons, as well as give examples of when one would be better and when one would be worse. So let's start off with Memory Loss. Obviously, the main benefit to Memory Loss is that it does not target. So this card is incredibly good against two particular matchups. One absolutely relevant and one not so relevant, but you are still likely to see. The one that's completely relevant is Cosmo, because this card snipes Dark Destroyer. So there you go. And it also hits cards like Slip Rider, pretty much the spot removal of the deck. And the less relevant matchup that this card is amazing against is Magispector, just because they cannot be targeted, and all their effects are on summon, and yeah, you can just Memory Loss them, they're switched to defense, and they can't really do anything with those monsters now because their effects are negated. So, yes, and another pro, like I've kind of just hinted to, is that when you resolve it, the monster that is being negated is switched to defense. Which we all know, defense is a much more vulnerable position than attack mode, just because normally monsters now have more attack than defense. So that's also a very nice little caveat to it. Another thing is that it's also a really it's a cheap alternative source of effect negation for, say, something like Breakthrough Skill, Solemn Strike, Fiendish Chain. Even though the Breakthrough Skill and Fiendish Chains aren't really that expensive now, thanks to the Gold Series reprint for Breakthrough Skill, and just because of the fact that Fiendish Chain is just not that good anymore. So yeah, those are the main benefits for Memory Loss. However, some of the cons are the fact that this card has a fairly strict activation requirement. Basically, the card reads, when a face-up attack position monster your opponent controls just activated an effect, except during damage step, negate that effect, and if you do, change that monster to face-up defense position. So first off, if you're negating an effect with this card, that monster has to be in face-up attack position. It cannot be in defense position, and it cannot, basically, it cannot be in defense, because that doesn't meet requirements. So yeah, and another thing about it is that I checked the rulings for it, and that this card must be directly chained to an effect in order to negate it. So let's just set up an example where Memory Loss would be completely subpar, or just not even be able to activate at all. So let's just say your opponent has 3 back row set. You know, you don't necessarily know what it is. You activate something like an Instant Fusion, and then your opponent says Chain Artifact Sanctum, and then they summon Artifact Beagle Attack in defense, like they normally would. Obviously, because Beagle Attack is in defense, you can't really do anything about it. Sanctum resolves. In the next chain, Beagle Attack will activate, and then your opponent will bring out a Moral Attack and a Scythe. And what you negate with Memory Loss completely depends on what chain links your opponent will place these effects on. If your opponent puts Moral Attack Chainlink 1, Scythe Chainlink 2, Memory Loss has to negate Scythe. If your opponent goes Scythe Chainlink 1, Moral Attack Chainlink 2, Memory Loss has to negate Moral Attack. However, there's also another caveat, so let me just reset the scenario. Say, like, you activate Instant Fusion, again, Sanctum, Beagle Attack. However, if your opponent does the following, you completely miss the activation timing for Memory Loss. Say your opponent brings out Scythe in defense, Moral Attack in defense, and Scythe in attack position, and they declare their chain links, Scythe Chainlink 1, Moral Attack Chainlink 2. In that case, you cannot activate Memory Loss because you have to directly chain it to the previous chain link, which would be Moral Attack, which is in defense, which means you miss activation timing completely. You cannot activate the card at all. However, if they reversed it and they put side chain link 1, if they put Marl tag chain link 1, side chain link 2, then yes, you can activate memory loss and you have to hit those scythe. So yeah, that's just a bit of a ruling thing I found out, just because, yeah. And really, artifacts are the best example I can make out of this, just because it's really the only way how I could actually create the scenario of multiple monster effects activating in the same chain that you could actually chain this card to. So yeah, I mean, artifacts, if your opponent is smart, they can completely play around memory loss just by summoning everything in defense, or actually just even summoning one monster in defense and just playing their chain link smart. So yeah. However, if we take the same scenario, we all know how good breakthrough skill is against artifacts. That's undisputable. You just breakthrough skill the beagle attack and then just be good. So yeah, and speaking of breakthrough skill, let's actually discuss breakthrough skill. The pros, obviously, we all know that breakthrough skill has its great graveyard effect, where during your turn, or if an opponent's monster effect is actually during your turn, it's a spell suite too. Just for reference, you can banish this card from your graveyard, target one monster your opponent controls, negate its effect until the end of the turn. Since it's spell suite 2, if your opponent would summon an artifact during your turn, you could banish this from your graveyard, target that artifact, and negate its effect. So yeah, and another pro is that it has a very simple activation requirement. It doesn't. You can activate this in a completely open game state if need be. As long as there are monsters on the field. I mean, you don't necessarily have to change. I mean, as long as you're turn player, you can activate this in an open game state. So yes, as long as there are monsters on the field. If this was your opponent's turn, then obviously you could not activate this in an open game state because you'd have to chain it to a monster's effect or summon. You'd have to be able to chain it to something. It has to start a chain. So yeah. And another pro is that it offers a large amount of utility for a lot of decks. I mean, any deck that mills will at least side breakthrough skill. Like Burning Abyss, I think, should still be siding breakthrough skill. Lightsworn sided breakthrough skill. Infernoids can side breakthrough skill. Any deck that mills basically can side breakthrough skill, as long as other things. And as far as cons are concerned, the only con I could actually think of for breakthrough skill is that it targets. Which means that, I wonder what's superior out of the two. Don't get me wrong, memory loss has its niche for stopping Dark Destroyer, but besides that, that's kind of it. Which is why I think breakthrough skill is better. However, you guys can dispute that in the comment sections below. Although I do think you would largely agree that breakthrough skill is better. I mean, for the longest time, I was more afraid of my Cosmo matchup than anything, but after this last regional, after seeing only one Cosmo, it's just like, I need to rethink how I'm actually playing, because I'm not seeing Cosmo almost at all, which means that this card is pretty much pointless, and I'd rather have a versatile form of effect negation for my wider variety of matchups. So, yeah, that explains my reasoning for why I chose breakthrough skill over memory loss in this comparison of effect negation. So yeah, tell me what you guys think, leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.